You join me for this session up here at the absolutely amazing Monument Fishery in Shropshire. Now, I've got 36 hours ahead of me. It's early November and it's the first week that they've allowed natural baits on here. They're not allowed to be used all through the summer, and I've known from previous years, keeping in touch with Harry and Rob, the owner, that this time of year is a very, very good time of year. It's taken me a couple of years to actually get a slot the first week in November, but I've got 36 hours ahead of me. The weather's all right, it has been fishing all right, the pressure's on, the rods are out. Fingers crossed I can catch myself a Monument 2 carp. The peg that I'm fishing this time around on Monument 2 is actually peg number 2. Now, the way that RH Fisheries run the booking on Monument 1 and Monument 2 is you have to book the peg that you want to fish in advance. Now, from a personal point of view, I think it's a very, very good way, certainly towards when you're fishing day ticket lakes. Now, I fish a lot of day ticket lakes and it just cuts out the hassle of driving up here in the morning, not knowing where you're going to end up. You know that you're going to put yourself in with the best possible chance when you actually arrive at the lake. Now, like I said, it has been a couple of years since I actually booked this trip in, and the reason I did book it is because this is a very good time of year to be it, and the reason that I've chosen 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝗀 is because it gives me a lot of options. Now, much like when I'm fishing anywhere else, there's nothing worse than going somewhere and having no options. This peg is a very big swim, you've got a lot of water, you've got a sunken bar out to the right hand side, and you've also got an area of open water as well. And this time of year, the fish do start to group up a little bit more than what they would do sort of in the middle part of the year, and having an area of water out in front of you that you can sort of search out and try and find the fish can sometimes be the difference between catching nothing or getting a couple of bites. So I'm hoping this time around it's going to pay off. It is a peg that I've fished in before, it is a peg that I've caught from before, and going on previous captures around this time of year, it's an area where the fish like to sit. So here's hoping something happens. Now, I started off my trip with 2 D-rigs. It's a rig that I've covered before on numerous platforms, and there's a link below to exactly how I tie it. But one method that has caught me so many carp over the years, and to be honest with you, it's a method that I should use more of really. And on a day like today, with no rain, it's quite mild, they're actually a pleasure to tie. When it's raining, they're an absolute nightmare, and that is the solid bag. So I'm going to leave one on a D-rig, and I'm going to bring one in now, and I'm going to put one on a solid bag. So I'm just going to show you now the rig that I would use and what I'm going to be using inside the solid bag. So the rig, first things first, always use an uncoated braid. You don't want to be using a coated braid, a fluorocarbon or a mono hook length, because when you're putting it inside the bag, it's going to be kinked and it's just going to hinder the presentation. The reason why a solid bag is so good is because the braided hook link can lay coiled inside the little parcel of food. When the fish sucks up that bait, it has to go a long way back in the fish's mouth before it feels any resistance from the lead. So you have to use it with just a normal plain braid. So I'm going to be using 20-pound sinking braid, and I'm going to peel off about 8 or 9 inches. Now, another thing that a lot of people sort of tend to do is fish really, really short rigs inside solid bags. Me personally, and what I found over the years of using them, is that a long rig is actually more effective. Yes, it looks a little bit more cumbersome when you do actually put the rig in the bag and coil it up a little bit, but I feel that a longer rig just works better, certainly for the places that I go to. So in the end of that, I'm going to tie a little loop ready to attach my hook bait. Now, I could use a little pop-up or a little wafter, which is something that I would normally use, but I have found from fishing up at these RH waters is these fish are very, very cute. So I'm going to go for a small piece of foam with a couple of maggots just tipped off. Obviously that's going to be inside the bag, so there's going to be no way that those maggots are going to come off when I make a cast. So I'm going to put a small little loop in the end, pull that down nice and tight, trim the tag end off. And then another thing that I see a lot of people sort of not do prior to putting the hook on is they don't actually put their hook bait on, and then when you end up tying the rig, I always see it's either too close to the hook or too far away. So always put your hook bait on before you start whipping the hook on. So I'm going to cut myself a little piece of foam, Not a massive piece of foam because I'm only going to be putting a couple of maggots on. Small little hook baits. Certainly this time of year, the smaller the better. Just because we're fishing for big carp doesn't mean that we've got to use a big hook bait. So I'm going to slide a piece of foam on there. And normally, like I say, I'll put them on in a minute, I don't need to do them just yet. Normally, you'd be putting a boilie stop through there if you're using a pop-up or a wafter, but because I'm using maggots, I'm going to use that same loop there to tie off my maggots on the end. So, on to the next little stage. I'm getting myself some hook silicone, chopping myself a little piece of that off. Oh, do that again without dropping it, like so, and then just using the baiting needle just to put that down onto the braid, like so, and then to choose a hook. Now I always use a wide gate beak hook, certainly when I'm fishing in solid bags. A 4 or a 5, I'm not too bothered really when it comes to that sort of the size. For this rig, I'm going to go for a 5. I'm just going to check that's nice and razor sharp, and then I'm going to start off by it. And this again, I see a lot of people sort of making a little mistake at this point. So when you've got your piece of silicone on, if you imagine I'm trapping the silicone just on my finger there, just to bring the braid over to one side, just to give me a little bit more room to get the point of the hook through. I see a lot of people, they try and poke the hook through, it catches inside the braid, it frays the hook link, and you've got to start again. So I'm pulling that to one side with the point of the hook facing down towards where the hook bait is. I'm simply going to pass the hook through the silicone like so and bring it round, and I always like to set the silicone directly opposite the barb. Now the hook's trapped in place, it's very easy to set the length of the hair. Now I like to leave a couple of mil just off the end of the hook there, just to allow for a little bit of movement. The last thing I want to be doing is pulling that foam right up against the shank of the hook, and it just restricts the way that the hook can move when the fish picks the hook bait up, hopefully. And then a very simple knotless knot. So I'm going back in through the eye. I'm only going to go for a 6 or a 7 turn, that's not going to come undone. Back through the eye of the hook, like so. Again, if you do like putting a kicker or a piece of shrink tube on, now's the perfect opportunity. I don't, I just like to fish it as it is. And then to finish the rig off, I'm just going to tie a figure of 8 loop, exactly how I would do if I was attaching it to a quick change clip with a figure of 8 loop. That goes through there, and then trim the tag end off, and I'm going to pick up my lead like so. Now I'm fishing it with a drop-off inline system, and I'm simply going to loop to loop the hook link on the swivel, passing the hook bait and hook back through that hole, and pulling it down tight to get it all in position. That goes through there, that'll be lovely. Pull that down, and there we go. So we've now got the rig on the lead, extremely basic. All of my fishing is very, very simple, and certainly when you're solid bagging, the main aim of the game is to get that lead with that hook bait and a little parcel of bait out to where the fish are. The last thing I want to be doing is tying some fandango rig, putting it inside a solid bag. This is all you need. Very, very simple, and get it out to where the fish are. So that is the lead, that's the rig. Now I'm just going to attach a few maggots. Right, so getting myself a lovely little selection of needles here, which I've purchased. Take a needle from the pack. Now it's very important now that the needle is as sharp as it can possibly be. If it's a blunt needle and you're trying to poke it through the maggots, you are going to, I know you're bursting them by putting this needle through them, but you're going to burst them and you're going to rip them. And if they start leaking out, you're going to put them inside a solid bag, and you're just going to have a disaster. What's inside the maggot is going to melt the solid bag. So like I say, I'm not looking to put loads of maggots on the rig. I'm literally going to put 6 or 7, a small little clump that's just going to sit in amongst a nice bag of maggots and pellets. So that's 2, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, we'll go for 7, shall we? 7 seems a good number. So that's 7 maggots on there, like so. And then a piece of bait floss. This way it becomes a little bit tricky. you're passing your bait floss through the hole where you would normally put your boilie stop. Folding it back on itself, and then, I should have done this before really, and then poke one of the ends of the bait floss through the needle like so, pulling the maggots off. They go down on the bait floss, down to the hole, and then I'm literally tying 3 or 4 overhand knots to secure the maggots in place. Now obviously when you come to re-chucking this and you are going to be changing the maggots, just be a little bit careful when you snip the maggots off, because obviously you are tying them straight on to your braided loop, and the last thing you want to be doing is cutting through your braided loop and then having to tie a new rig. So pull the maggots off first, and there's always a little loop in the bait floss that you can just get the scissors in and just nip it off. So nip that off, and then what you do is just pull the piece of foam down just to lock them into place. And there we go. The maggots are on there and they are ready to rock. Now, like I say, you are piercing with a needle, so yes, you are bursting them. They are leaking a little bit, so they're going to go back into my buckets of pellets, and it's just going to take a little bit of that sort of moisture away from them, just enough that I can put them inside the bag and it isn't going to melt the bag when I chuck it out. So I'm going to move my tackle box out the way and then down into my little workstation down here. So I'm going to put that into a little bucket of pellets, start drying it out. Now again, much like the hook bait, the maggots that you're going to be putting inside the bag, they also want to be dry as well. So in these ones here, I've just added a little bit of powder and a few pellets there just to take any moisture away that's inside the maggots. The last thing you want to be doing is trying to tie a maggot solid bag with a load of damp maggots, because it just won't happen. So got them like so. I'm going to do this down here where it's a little bit easier to do. And then, so I'm grabbing my solid bag. I always use the smallest solid bag that I can get away with. The thing is with a solid bag is you're not looking to fill the fish up, you're just looking to get a bite. So I've got my bag, I'm going to open it up with my fingers. Now all of the bags that I always tie always start off the bottom with a real small layer of the pellets and the powder. This is just something that I can nestle the hook bait down onto, and it just avoids contact with the side of the bag with my hook bait as much as I possibly can. So then I'm getting the hook bait. As you can see there, the moisture on the maggots has collected a fair bit of the dust, so I know they're nice and dry. And then I'm laying the rig in as best as I possibly can. And the beauty with a solid bag is how you lay it in now is exactly how it's going to look when it mounts out in the lake. So that's like so. Obviously with your maggots, you've got to be very careful. The last thing you want to be doing is piercing a maggot with your hook. So that's going to go down like so, a little bit fiddly, but we're getting there. So you can see that that's in there. It's not coming to any harm. Nothing's going to mask the hook. And then I'm going to go for a tiny little bit of the pellet mix back over that hook there, just to protect it. And now the fun part. Now it's very tricky, if you like, to tie one with maggots. And certainly if you're getting a few bites and you're a little bit damp and a little bit wet, things can become a little bit difficult. But maggot solid bags have got me out of trouble on so many occasions, so it's well worth the extra effort. So my maggots here, they're nice and dry. It's a bit hard in the wind. So I'm going to start adding a few maggots into the bag, like so. And then once I've got a couple of pinchfuls inside the bag, I'm then going to just lay the lead in. Now, it's not like making them with pellets. You can ram the lead right into the pellets and proper push it into place. Obviously with the maggots, the harder you push, the more chance you've got a bursting one. So I'm just laying the lead into the bag there, nice and central inside the bag. I see a lot of people making the mistake of putting the lead in last. Now if you put the lead in last when you're making a solid bag and you cast it out, the lead that's at the back of the bag is heavier than the contents that's at the front of the bag. When you chuck it out, it's going to tumble and it isn't going to go where you want it. So you want the lead nice and central, it's going to be nice and aerodynamic, and it's going to fly to where you want it. So the lead's in place. Now I'm going to add a few more maggots. It's not the easiest in the wind. A few more maggots into here, like so. And then another little important thing, always cap off the bag with a little pinch of pellets. If you're going to burst one, it's going to be at the top when you go to do the knot and tie your bag off. So always tie your bag off on a nice little bit of pellet, ensuring that you're not going to hook a maggot or burst a maggot when you tie it off with a tape. So a little bit of pellet on top of them. It's not the easiest in this wind, I've got to be honest. Pellet on top of there, like so. And then using your fingers, you can be quite forceful, just working around the line that's coming out of the bag as the central point. And then when you feel confident enough, make a twist in the PVA, like so. A little twist in there, so I've got a little twist in the bag. That's locked in place, that's not going anywhere. And then get your PVA tape, and all I do is I just wrap it round 5 times, bite the tape off, and then to secure that in place I'm just going to do a couple of overhand knots. So there's one, there's 2. Now being very, very careful, because I'm fishing this on a naked line setup, I'm now going to trim off the excess PVA around the top. So I start off with the 2 little tags, pulling the line to one side, cutting down the side of the line. Then I can pull the line then out of the cut, trim off the top of the bag, make it look a little bit fancy, not that the fish really mind. And then to finish the bag off, I'm just going to the corners and I'm going to lick and stick these down just to get that last little bit of air out the bag, to make it tight and more importantly make it aerodynamic. So a little bit of saliva there. 1, 2, 3. Onto the other corner. Exactly the same again. A little bit of saliva. 1, 2, 3. And there we go. Considering I've done it on camera, in the wind, that's turned out absolutely perfect. So yeah, the key to tying a bag and putting maggots inside is making sure everything is dry. And that is going to be fired out there. I'm going to be fishing one of these on one rod, Illusion D on the other rod. Try and work out what the fish want. If they have a solid bag, both will go on solid bags. If I get one on the D, I'll take the solid bag off and I'll put 2 Ds out. But for now, that's going to go out there and hopefully that's going to catch me a Monument 2 carp. That's 2 fresh singles, so to speak, out there. It's always pretty good here on the first day anyway, sort of towards what will be the end of the day, so late afternoon. So I don't want to go start putting any bait in just yet. I'm going to leave them out there for a couple of hours before I make any sort of decision on where I'm going to be putting my bait for tonight. But it's looking pretty good. I am going to put some bait out tonight because realistically tomorrow is normally the day that's the most prolific. The way the sessions work here, 36 hours, you've got a day, a night and a day. And as is the case with most places that I go to, the second, third or whatever day is always a lot better than the first. The first day is all about just trying to work something out, and the second day is hopefully capitalising on that and catching, I say. So yeah, give them a couple of hours, I'm going to put some bait out. Well, I'm trying to devise a little bit of a plan for tonight. It hasn't got the best form for night bites, which to be honest, this time of year, not getting a bite at night isn't really a major issue. It means I can have a good night's kip, but obviously I want to try and get a bite. Now, as I mentioned before, the peg that I'm in, I've got quite a bit of scope and I've got sort of 2 areas that I know I can fish to that I've caught from in the past. I've got a little sort of raised bar, if you like, out to the right hand side short, and then I've got a bit of open water. But even though it's cold, the bar allows me to fish on shallow water. Now, on these particular venues, you're not allowed to use zigs. I haven't seen loads of fish. There's a few anglers on here. There hasn't been hardly anything caught today, which to me signals that there's probably a lot of fish swimming around in the upper layers. So I'm thinking tonight I'm going to go 1 on the shallow and 1 in the deep. You're only allowed to use 2 rods here. Normally I'd put all my eggs in one basket, but there isn't really enough sort of going on in one particular area for me to do that. So I'm going to go one on the shallow, one on the deep. Hopefully I'll get a broken night's sleep, but if not, tomorrow is a new day. So I'm going to clip this up now and I'm going to have a little feel around and just try and find somewhere that's nice and smooth. Right, so I've made my mind up. I'm going to go 2 in the deep water, 1 off the side of this bar and 1 out in the middle. I'm going to go just for my normal illusion D's, little clusters of maggots, and then I'm going to spawn a very, very simple mix of hemp, casters and maggots, and that's about all I can do really. And I'm going to reevaluate tomorrow. I'm not going to change from the baited spots tomorrow. I know that might seem a little bit rash even though I've not caught anything yet, but one thing I've learned from fishing over the years is when it's not fishing very well, is the more you chop and change your spots, the more places that you're putting bait in, the more options that you're giving the fish to feed in, and it just reduces your chance of getting a bite. So I'm happy with where I'm fishing. I'm sticking to my guns. That's the plan. If it works, good. If it doesn't work, we try again next time. So as expected, a good night's sleep, which I'm not complaining about. It was a very early start yesterday morning. It is a mad lake, this one. It's mad in a sense that there's quite a lot of fish in here. It's not a massive lake, and I know it sounds obvious, but you can either be right on them or you can be a million miles away from them. And another thing as well is whenever you come into any venue, day ticket venues probably more so, you can never account for what the anglers around you are going to do. Now obviously I'm not here to tell anybody what they shouldn't be doing. When I come to this place, I like to sort of make minimal disturbance to try and get the fish into my peg, but if there's lads either side of you that want to put a bit of bait out, want to do a few rechucks, you know, that can have a bit of an impact. And always on that first day, everyone's keen, they want to get the bait out, they want to get rods out, they want to sort of chop and change a few things, and it always takes until the second to sort of settle them down. And I've just been looking out there then, and where I'm spotting to, there's like a big sort of willow tree, and the fish has just shown to the right. I'm probably assuming it's about 2.5 rod lengths to the right hand side of where I've got bait. So the beauty is now is I haven't had a bite over the bait. I know that there's still going to be bait there, even though I've only put small items of bait out. It's still going to be out there. So I'm hoping that the second day is going to produce the goods, because another thing with this lake as well, there is so many nice big fish in here that every time I come here, I've only ever got lucky on one occasion and caught one of the big ones out of here, but there's so many of them in here, and I just drive away from here always frustrated of what could I have done better. And I think the answer to it is nothing. Sometimes it doesn't matter what you try, you're just not going to catch them. But I'm hoping this time around, this is the time of year that I've always wanted to get on here. It's sort of late autumn now, I suppose, but as I've said in a few things that I've done recently, autumns now are very different to what they used to be. You've got such small windows of opportunity. Last week we had low air pressure, this week it's high air pressure, and just little things like that can make the biggest differences. But I ain't going to make excuses. I'm going to try, because I really want to get myself a Monument 2 fish. I'm just going to tie a fresh solid bag now, ready to put out over the spot, give it about another half hour, 40 minutes, redo them, and that'll be me then set for the day. So fingers crossed, something's going to happen. we are into a fish. Now, I'd not long seen a fish show just to the right of the baited area, and I was going to tie a solid bag up to put over it, and resisted the temptation. And these fish in here, they are so funny when you get a bite off of them. It literally bobbing whacked the top, fell back down, and I'm in. And it's been doing a few fish the past couple of sessions, and they've been good fish. So I'm going to concentrate because every fish out of here counts. So hopefully I can get a fish, my old heart's racing. I'm fishing slack lines, which to be fair, I don't normally ever do. Anyone would know, any videos they've seen of me is always tight line, and with a slack line, the bites are always a little bit funny, bobbing at the top. Both myself and Joe looked, it was like it's a liner, and I just pulled a little bit of line back through the buzzer, and I could feel it was mega slack. And yeah, we're into a fish, so I'm going to concentrate and try and get her in. Don't know why I always get proper shaky when I play a fish out of here. Here we go. Here we go, you go. Voila! We have got one in the net. Second day always comes good. That's what we came for, Joe. That's what we came for. So we've got shite. Oh, it's a lovely fish. Look at that one. Not sure how big he is. He's a really stunning fish. Oh yeah. Look at that. Right, rod back out. They're obviously on the bait. There's the old wriggler. The old D-rig never lets me down. There's the rig. The rig in question. God, I'm freezing. Right, fresh hook bait. Let's have her on. I'm just going to whip up a new rig after having that fish, and yeah, it's such a simple rig to use, which is, to be fair, the reason why I use it. And also, coming up onto the monument, this was the first place where I was ever sort of not shown the D-rig, because obviously it's been around for years, you know, and I've never claimed to have reinvented anything here, but the fish in these lakes are they're very pressured. Now, I know a lot of the lakes that I fish, the carp are also very pressured, but here they're in such a small lake, whereas before I'd be using sort of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 braided hook links and stuff like that. Here, the bailiffs, you know, Harry and then Tom, when he was working here, used to say, just by doing everything a little bit more inconspicuous definitely gets you extra bites. And these Illusion D-rigs, they've massively improved my fishing over the past few years, since I've used them, since I've taken them elsewhere. And here, they work very well. And this is just a very simple way, or should I say, this is the way that I tie them, and that I normally leave them. So I just normally leave them long, leave the tag end out, and then you can see with this rig here that I've just had the fish on. The reason why I don't do anything with the tag end is because I simply snip off the D, and it enables me to just put exactly the same hook bait on this tag end, pass the tag end back through the eye of the hook, and blob it back down, and it's ready to go again. So not only is it a very simple rig to tie, it's quick as well, and you can have loads of these tied up in your bag, ready to rock and roll for the next bite. But yeah, like I say, this was the first place where I ever sort of started applying the Illusion D-rigs to my own fishing, and yeah, it's worked, you know. And I know a lot of people say, oh, it's the same rig that you're showing, or it's the same rig that you're using, but it's like I say to anybody, you've got to use what you're confident in. There's nothing that I see on the bank an awful lot. People will wind 3 rods in, they've got 3 different rigs on. Now for me, if I'm going fishing, other than maybe a solid bag or a zig, all 3 of my rigs are going to be the same regardless, and it's always going to be an Illusion D-rig, because I feel it's the best rig that gives me the best chance of not only hooking a carp, but more importantly, landing a carp. Very simple rig to tie. Does exactly what I want it to do, almost invisible in the water, and it presents my bait perfectly. And 99.999% of the time, everything that I hook, I land. So that's the rig. I've not tied it off at any length. I'm going to go for probably 12 to 14 inches. And again, a lot of people say to me, why do you use such long rigs? Now, what we feel out there with a lead, we've got no idea if there's any form of sediment or anything on the bottom. And if your lead's plugging into the sediment and you've got a short rig, you haven't got a lot of room between where the lead's gone in and where the hook bait is for the rig to present itself properly. So I like to use a long rig on the basis that my lead lands, say, here, and my hook bait lands here, and there's almost a bit of a curve on the rig. I don't ever like it sitting dead straight, and the reason for that is because I want the fish to pick up the bait to go back in the fish's mouth before it feels any resistance from the lead, because the further back in the mouth the hook bait goes, the more chance you've got of absolutely nailing it. And as well, it doesn't tangle, so why not use long hook links? If I'm ever doing any like feeder fishing, which is only occasionally, but I do quite a bit of it, I would always use a long rig, even if I'm feeder fishing, and a lot of the match boys use them as well. So I use it in my carp fishing. It works for me. I understand it might not work for everybody, but it works for me, and I'm always confident whenever I've got a long rig out. So that's the length we're going to go for. I reckon he is 12, 14 inches long. I'm going to finish him off with a figure of 8 loop, fresh hook bait. We're ready to rock and roll. Well, here we go, just under 27 pound, and what an absolutely stunning Monument 2 mirror this one is. I said about 45 minutes ago that I was going to leave them, have a coffee and rechuck them, and I'm glad I left them, because leaving it out on the spot has produced this bad boy. And like I said, the second day is always the better day, so here's hoping that it continues for the rest of the trip. Off to fight another day. Right, on to the next one. Well, as predicted by Mr. Weatherman, today is a lot nicer day than what it was yesterday. I said yesterday evening as I was getting the rods out that I'm fishing down the side of a bar. Now this bar is 6 foot off the side of it, and it's about 3.5 feet on top of it, and the weather that we got today is pretty unseasonable for this time of year. The sun's out, and to be honest with you, it's not far off a t-shirt weather. So I'm actually going to bring the one off of the side of the bar and I'm going to put it on top of the bar in the shallow water. You're not allowed to use zigs up on the Monument complex, but I've just got a feeling with how many anglers are on here and how sort of few fish that are coming out, if the fish are in the upper layers, the closest that I'm going to physically get to them without actually putting the zig out, which I'm not allowed to do, is to fish on top of the bar. So I'm going to bring the one in off the bait. I'm going to drop a nice big fat solid bags of maggots straight out on top of the bar, and hopefully that there's a few fish sort of basking over it, getting the last of the autumn sun. So yes, I'm tying this up now. I'm going to flick this out on top of that bar and just see, and just sort of keep an eye out, and if I see any fish show anywhere else, it's no biggie to reel it in. Oh, no biggie to reel it in and reposition it somewhere else. So yeah, let's have a little go. Well, it's looking likely that that 27 pounder that I had earlier on is going to be the only fish of the session, but you know what, I don't really mind. One of the things when you're coming up to the Monument is obviously you don't know how it's going to fish. You can't stay on. You have literally got the 36-hour slot that you book on to fish and to try and make something happen. So in my opinion, to come up here and to go away having caught a fish is more than I could have ever asked for. So yeah, so it is a bit of a gamble, but what a fish to have caught as well. A lovely, lovely looking fish. It's been an absolute pleasure. It hasn't fished as well as what I expected it to, but like I say, that is part and parcel of the fishing up here, and the reason why I enjoy coming to this place, because even though it was a mid-20, it could have quite easily ripped off and it could have been a 50 pounder, but all the same, it's been a very, very enjoyable session. It's nice to get back up onto the monument fishery, and I'm sure I'm going to be coming back up here very, very soon.